So we're going to start talking about diversity and inclusion. This is very much the first of the series, so very much pitched as the introduction. I'm hoping nothing I say today is going to be revolutionary. It shouldn't be. It's very much, we're talking about terms, looking at some of the information that we collate, and getting you guys to really start thinking about the work in your organisation. It's also really useful just to have these conversations, I find. So that is what we've got plenty of opportunities for both group discussions and to use the chat function. Throughout the whole series, we're going to be looking at a holistic approach to diversity. I hope that was clear from the course outline. We've sectioned everything off, as it were, to really give you a focus for each of the sessions. And that is so that we can sort of target the information at you guys, and also to get you to think about how it can be used in your organizations, regardless of your size, your resources, staff, etc. So there will be some horrible homework. I'm not joking about the homework, but I am joking it's horrible, I promise. So we'll be getting you to think about that as, you know, taking the content that you've learned throughout the sessions, having a think about how it affects your organisation, and then bringing that back to the next session. So nothing should be, as I said, it's not a test, the next few sessions, but what we're really trying to do is kind of get you to get to the stage where you know who you are not engaging. You're looking at tools of the ways to engage them, whether it's through programming, collections development, audience development, workforce development, volunteers, board diversity, etc. And coming up with a few things that you and your organisation would like to do over the coming 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, and really take those key factors forward. And as part of this course, follow on from this course, I'll be able to support you to achieve some of those action points, as it were. Does that make sense to everybody? Perfect. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully you will see my screen. If I can get a quick thumbs up that you can see the screen. Perfect. So, as I said, today's learning objectives are relatively straightforward for an introduction session. We're looking at diversity and inclusion terminology, which is why I've got you to do the poll, which we'll just come on to in a second. We're looking at the picture of diversity in London, and I'm just using the overall picture of London, some information on museum audiences, and workforce development for this session. Next session, we're going to be delving into your own borough data, and you'll have an opportunity to have a look at what it means, what your, dare I say it, hyper-local audience is, and who you could be engaging with. But this is very much sort of top-level information, which I find really useful for funding applications, getting you guys to think about where comparing and contrasting where you're at the moment. We're also going to be looking at equality action points, and that's, as I said, is just about developing some points throughout the next 6 sessions on where you would like to go, etc. So, nice and easy this morning. What do we mean by diversity? I think it's really important to start with the terminology, because we use the words continuously, and they're going to be even more important as we go forward following on from the pandemic. So having some key information, I always find keywords to share with line managers, trustees, etc. is really useful to have at your fingertips. So where I have taken that information from, there are a number of different definitions, as you can imagine, that we can use. The Cambridge Dictionary define diversity as many different types of things or people being included in something, a range of different things or people. Sir Brian McAster, who previously reviewed diversity in the arts at the Arts Council, or on behalf of the Arts Council, states that it is to the benefit of everyone involved in the arts, creators, participants and audiences, to put diversity at the heart of everything cultural. ACE go a step further than that and define diversity to ensure that their work draws on and reflects the full range of backgrounds and perspectives to be found in our society, as well as ensure that the leadership and workforce of arts and cultural organisations reflect the diversity of contemporary England. The reason I brought that quote in is because it's about reflecting the diversity, and as part of the next 2 sessions, we'll be looking at what contemporary England in your boroughs looks like. So not just London, but your boroughs, so that you're able to better reflect who you represent, who you want to represent within your collections and who you want to target. For many public organisations, which includes museums, it's about a commitment to promoting equality and ensuring that no one is denied opportunities or discriminated against through prejudice or exclusion due to factors, and have the opportunity to reach their potential. So as I said, nothing about that is particularly revolutionary, but I always find it's really important when talking to senior managers to have some of those wording at the tip of your fingertips, as it were. So we're not just talking about diversity, but we're wanting to create inclusive organisations going forward. And some of the terminology we use around inclusivity includes accessibility and equality. So, perfect. Sorry about that. So again, and then I've put the Museums Association quote up there around equality, which is about every individual should have equal opportunity to make the most of their lives and their talents. It recognises that certain groups of people with particular characteristics have experienced discrimination. The reason I put those ones up there, again, I can use lots of others. It's because they all play a role in developing an inclusive organisation. They have different functions, purposes when we talk about embedding diversity practice. Importantly, diversity is the range of skills, perspectives, experience, knowledge, ability, identity that should be considered a thing. When we're talking about inclusion within museums, we're talking about the action of creating opportunities for those different things to come together. And accessibility is about checking that those differences have the opportunity to be included within our spaces. So why we talked in our group around, and from Elizabeth's group, about legislation. So what underpins this work? We've got the Equality Act of 2010, the Public Sector Equality Duty of 2011, and then we're talking about business case for diversity. This is obviously, the first 2 are legislation and law, which we can use, but all of them talk around protected characteristics. The Act of 2020 brought together, it's not new legislation as it were, but it brought together existing anti-discrimination requirements into one piece of legislation, and it outlines those 9 protected characteristics. The Public Sector Equality Duty, they all really roll off the tongue really easily, so I do apologise if I mix the words up. Came into force on the 5th of April 2011 and is the one that really affects, museums as a public sector organisation. And it requires public authorities to have a due regard in the need to eliminate discrimination, harassment, victimization, and other prohibited conduct. Secondly, to advance equality of opportunity between people who are a relevant protected characteristic and those who do not. And thirdly, it's to encourage you to foster good relationships between people who share a protected characteristic and those who do not. And then I've added a bit around the business case for diversity. Has anybody heard anything about business case for diversity before? No, that's fine. It's absolutely fine. It's been around for a while, and I've provided some extra links in the additional handouts. But what it has been is an attempt to go beyond the sort of legal compliance with these pieces of legislation, and it's basically showcasing arguments and statistics that there is a value in the diversity of thought and perspectives from employees from a wide range of cultures and what they bring to your organisation. We've talked a lot about programming already through the discussions, but this is really about thinking about your workforce, your board of trustees, and the importance of having voices from different cultures and backgrounds within that. The McKinsey 2015 Diversity Matters report, which again, there is a link in your additional handouts. Just an interesting fact for those who are not aware, states that companies with the highest proportion of ethnic and cultural diversity are 33% more likely to outperform their competitors. So it's around having those voices, not just within your audiences, but within your organisations as well, which obviously we were talking more about in the next few sessions. But basically, it's around the more diverse your museum are, you should achieve better results, i.e. have more visitors and have more money, essentially, is the cusp of it. As I said, there'll be some more information around the business case for diversity. Again, this is sort of all of your trustees or equivalents will be very aware of the Equality Act and Public Sector Act, and we'll probably silo that into sort of buildings, making those accessible, or asking you to talk about communities. But when we're talking about the business case of the diversity, that's where we're talking about, we're trying to make a holistic approach to become a more inclusive organisation going forward. And these are sort of the arguments that you can use around, where you put your description, your role descriptions for your volunteers, perhaps, why you're making a wider effort to become more inclusive within your workforce, where you're putting those job adverts, etc., etc. There is a business case to back you up, as it were. So please be aware of that. What I'm going to do next is be very boring, unfortunately, and I do apologise that you've got to listen to me droll on just a little bit about the next few slides. But what I want to do is give you some facts from official sources around what the current picture of diversity looks like in both London and the museum sector itself. And it's to help you put that sort of into context where your organisation is in terms of your visitors, and to get you to start about comparing that for your audiences, workforce, etc. As I said, next week we'll be talking specifically about your borough data, but this is just sort of top level information around the diversity picture. So, that was a very, very quick brief. So, London, this is all taken from GLA's intelligence report. It's produced once a year. It's the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Evidence Base for London. There are links to this in your pack. This is based on the 2018 data. 2019 data was due to be released as of July, but for some unknown reason, the Mayor of London has been busy for the last few months, so this has not been released. But when it is released, and if it's released within the time period of these sessions, I will give you those links. But this is just to give you sort of some information on London, as it were. Anyone got any idea how many people live in London? Of which about half and half ratio female to male. About a fifth of that population are under 16, and 2/3 are working age, which for this report counts as between 16 and 64, and then less than an eighth are over 65. So, however, despite being the smallest age group in London's population, the number of Londoners over 65 is projected to increase by 86% by 2050, which is faster than any of the other age groups. So we are an aging population, as it were. 1.3 million classify themselves as disabled adults in London. So that is having either a physical or mental impairment that has a substantial or long-term negative effect on their ability to carry out normal daily activities. Disability is closely related to age, with 13% of the working age population classifying themselves as disabled versus 28% of over 65s. Any idea what proportion or what percentage of Londoners are white British? You want to have us a guess? There are no wrong answers, I promise. Anyone want to have a hazard a guess?
Is it 30%?
Higher. It's currently 57%. As what classify themselves as white British, with the remaining 43% having a Black, Asian or minority ethnic background. This does make London, unsurprisingly, the most ethnically diverse region or nation in the UK. However, what's important here is the GLA projections estimate that the BAME population expected to reach 50%. So it will be more by 2038. So we're looking at just over 15 years' time. 2% of adult Londoners identify as gay or lesbian, which is significantly higher than the national rate of 1.3. And a further 0.6 identify as bisexual and 0.6 as other sexual identities. Again, that is higher in London than it is for the rest of the UK. When we talk about social class, we tend to look at the national statistics for social economic classification, which is termed the NSSEC, because that nicely rolls off the tongue when you're searching for it on the internet. But it says within London that most households, so that's 52%, are in the top 2 social classes, which refers to them being within managerial, administration and professional occupations. So that's 52%, which has actually increased in recent years and is higher than the national proportion, which is only 46. 27% of London households are in the bottom 3 social classes, which includes long-term workless, and 21% are in immediate occupations or self-employed. So we've got quite the remaining 10% are full-time students. That will obviously change significantly or become even more apparent over the coming months as more research is done on the impact of the pandemic. And this figure is likely to go up as well, which is that 49 per 1,000 children in London are looked after by local authorities. According to GP records, approximately 2% of London's population, which is about 175,000 people, have a learning disability. And in primary schools, 32% of pupils of compulsory school age are from minority ethnic origins, which is an increase since 2016. And the last interesting fact around London is the minority ethnic pupils make up 66.3% of the increase in pupil numbers in primary schools, with overall 3.2 million of residents being born outside of the UK. Again, we have no idea how the long-term impact of COVID is going to have on those figures. So bear in mind that this is obviously in a pre-COVID world. So that's just some headlines about London. And you can sort of already probably start saying in your own heads how that compares very broadly to your visitor figures, or not, as the case may be, and where you sort of sit with that top level information. The next slide I've got is around audiences, which is mainly collected from the Taking Part survey, which is the longest longitudinal survey taken by the government, taken by DCMS. This again hasn't been up. They were due to release some more reports this year, particularly around diversity trends this year. And again, that has not happened yet. So I am basing this information on figures from 2015, but this is the most up-to-date information that has been released so far, if that makes sense. Again, if that information is updated in the next 10 weeks, I will be sending through the links. The other one that I haven't spoken about here is the Audience Agency's Museums Audience Report, which was published in 2018. And I haven't put it here because it's based on MPOs, and where we can draw data from, you know, as comparison to London, we are talking about the much larger organisations here, whereas the Taking Part survey is the audiences for all museums. So that's why I've included it here. There are others, again, in the handout notes, but just to flag, it's slightly older data, as it were. But some of the important things that come out of this report, I will just go through those quickly because I'm aware of the time. So there have been significant increases in engagement with museums and galleries for all demographic groups in all regions, yet engagement levels are higher for the upper socioeconomic group and for adults with no long-standing illnesses or disabilities. For both the white and black and minority ethnic groups, engagement with museums and galleries has increased. And engagement levels were higher for white ethnic group than Asian ethnic group between 2005 and 2010, but there was no significant difference by 2015. The different levels, engagement levels between socioeconomic groups is larger for museums and galleries than any of the other three cultural activities, with 24.1% for 2015. In 2015, from the longitudinal respondents who've said that they visited museums or galleries, 14% said the main reason was because there were more exhibitions that interested them. And of those who have visited less often, 31% stated that the main reason was because they had less free time. This statistic is also indicative of the increased number of single parent households. And then the last one, just to pull up here, is that 9.5% of those who had visited museums or galleries less often stated that the main reason was because they had other things they preferred to do in their leisure time. And 9.4% stated that there were less or no exhibitions that interested them. Not a particularly revolutionary statistic, but obviously based on what we were talking about in our groups, is an important one. People do consider that when they visit a museum. Does it have anything of interest to me, etc. And then lastly, this is London Museums and Workforce. This is taken from Arts Council's MPO report, which is published once a year. They also use data from their project grants as well. So it also is indicative of some of the smaller organisations such as yourself. There's quite a lot of information on that slide, as you can see. London bears better than some areas and less in others, particularly about it is worse, sorry, in terms of board of trustees. Board representation across MPO for Black and ethnic is 15%, with chief executives as 10% and our artistic directors at 11%. I'm aware of the time and that you can see all of that information on the screen, so I won't go into too much more detail on that. But this is particularly important slide looking at when we talk around workforce diversity after Christmas in session 4 and sort of where you compare yourselves to. I appreciate that obviously a number of your organisations are only a few members of staff, but we're also talking about volunteers here as well. So, great pleasure to introduce Collette. So I'm going to hand over to her now. Again, please do ask any questions in the chat function, and we will, at the end of the presentation, we will be able to answer anything that hasn't been answered already. So over to Collette.
Thanks very much, and good to kind of see you all on the screen. So I'm Collette Cork-Hurst, Senior Manager for Diversity at the Arts Council. I work kind of in the national team. Nationally, there used to be 2 of us, and we've just expanded to 4, so that's fantastic. And in all of the 5 areas, we have kind of a senior relationship manager for diversity and a relationship manager for diversity. So that's kind of the whole equality and diversity team throughout the Arts Council. So as has just been said, I'm going to go through some slides. Okay, I need to, there's the first problem. I knew there would be technical problems. I need to find my presentation. Is it possible to unshare the screen first so that I can get my presentation, please? Yep. Thank you very much. Right, that's great. Thank you. Okay, so I've introduced myself, so I think we can go on to the next slide.
Done.
Yeah, great. So you can see the approach that I'm going to take today. So firstly, looking at the holistic approach that the Arts Council has taken towards, in relation to equality, diversity and inclusion. Then looking at the equality and diversity action planning, a little bit on COVID-19 and Black Lives Matter. And then there's some information on resources that we've got available from the Arts Council. So next slide, please. So that's just a quote from Let's Create, which is our 10-year strategy, which we launched earlier this year. It seems a lifetime ago. But as you will see from that the role of museums plays a really key role in our strategy, and we want to support them in widening their reach. So as it states, the dynamic museum sector will be at the heart of this strategy. Over the next 10 years, alongside our statutory functions, we'll go on expanding public access to collections to ensure that they continue to delight and inspire as many people as possible, which is lovely. So next slide, please. So our strategy has 3 outcomes: creative people, cultural communities, and a creative and cultural, that should be cultural, I think a bit of it's been knocked off by our Arts Council logo, a creative and cultural country. So by creative people, we mean that everyone from all backgrounds and with different protected characteristics is able to be involved in creative activities, and ensuring that individuals also have the opportunity to enter and sustain a career in arts and culture. Our whole strategy is kind of place-based now. You may or may not know that we have our Creative People and Places programme, which is a place-based programme. And I think we're taking this approach to much more of our Arts Council strategy. So as I say, very much a place-based approach to provide opportunities for all parts of the community to engage and participate where they are. And the last one is, being an innovative cultural sector and working globally. Next slide, please. So underpinning all of our strategy, we've got some 4 investment principles. I'm going to concentrate obviously on the inclusivity and relevance one, but the other ones are ambition and quality, dynamism, and environmental responsibility. So under the inclusivity and relevance investment principle, we want England's diversity to be fully reflected in the organisations and individuals that we support and in the culture they produce. So as part of our duties under the Equality Act and the public sector equality duty, we're going to be asking organisations who receive regular investment from us, so MPOs essentially, to agree to targets for how their governance, leadership, employees, participants, audiences, and the work that they make is going to reflect the communities in which they work. And these targets will cover both protected characteristics, including disability, sex and race, as well as socio-economic background. And so we're going to be asking organisations to tell us how they're going to do that as part of the funding agreement. Under relevance, this really is about building closer connections with communities, particularly those who we know that we're currently underserving, so that we can strengthen the relevance to communities, and organisations will need to demonstrate how they're going to listen to the voices of the public, including children and young people, artists and creative practitioners, as well as what partners they're going to be working with in order to deliver those 3 outcomes that I've just gone through. So we'll be asking them how they're reflecting what they hear in the planning of their work. And it will be helpful for me to hear from you what kinds of things you're already doing in terms of relevance, because that will really help in terms of how we develop and deliver this in the future. Next slide, please. So as I say, this is a holistic approach. So in 2011, we launched the Creative Case for Diversity, and that has really deepened the cultural provision across the country, and that was mostly to do with programming. So to build on this, we want to organisations to consider the whole picture in relation to equality, diversity and inclusion, because all of these things are interrelated in terms of leadership, governance, workforce, visitors, and the work that we produce. So we want to make sure that, as I say, that everything is covered. And the evidence certainly shows us that we still have a long way to go, particularly, for example, around disabled people in the workforce. So that's the approach that we're taking. Next slide, please. I think you've just looked at some of these figures, but this was the data from our 18-19 diversity report on museum staff compared to all NPO staff. So from this, we can see that museums have a higher female workforce than across the portfolio. So it's around 10% higher than others in the portfolio. There's a 5% less Black, Asian and ethnically diverse people in the workforce than across the whole portfolio. So that's kind of 6% in museums compared to 11% across the portfolio. There's a slightly higher disabled workforce in museums, so 7% compared to 6% across the portfolio. But obviously, both of these figures are very low, and there is underrepresentation, as I say. And there's 3% less LGBT workforce in museums than across the portfolio, although I would say here that we do have much higher levels of unknowns and prefer not to say. So that gives a bit of a picture in terms of the workforce in museums and across the portfolio. And that's the diversity report that we published included that kind of data for the first time in terms of discipline. And I do think it's really useful to have that kind of more nuanced approach, you know, to make sure that we really can target action in different kinds of settings. So next slide, please. And this is about job roles, and this covers all of the MPO, so this hasn't been broken down by museums. But if we look at job roles across the whole portfolio, we can see that there's a higher percentage of female managers, so that's at like 60%, which is pretty high. There's a lower percentage of Black, Asian, ethnically diverse managers at 9%, and representation of disabled workers across all of the roles is lower. So there's definitely a lot of work that needs to be done, and a lot of focus that needs to be placed on these. Oh, the other thing that I should say is that in the previous slide, you will see that there was an explanation in terms of what we meant by artists and specialists and other. So that really should have been put on this side. Sorry about that. Okay, so can we go to the next slide, please? So why develop and implement equality action plans? Really, they're a good way of being able to assess where we're all starting from, because we all are going to be starting from different places, and a way to take targeted action and to monitor and evaluate how this is helping or not. So you know, in a nutshell, that's really what equality action plans are all about. So next slide, please. Good practice in equality action planning. What we want to make sure is that this isn't just the job of one or two people in the organisation, you know, like the diversity specialist. We want to make sure that everyone is committed to this agenda, and then it's embedded across the whole of the organisation. It's important to be able to see how we're making progress, and if we're not making progress, how we reassess to make sure that we do. All organisations are, as I say, at very different starting places, and they're all working under different circumstances. So the plan needs to be relevant to the individual organisation, to their challenges, their scale, and their resources. Next slide, please. This is a bit of a checklist, and obviously it's not exhaustive, but the hows of equality action planning. Analysing how well the organisation reflects the local demographic, setting smart objectives covering current and proposed activities, policies, and who's involved, to include actions on diversifying programming, workforce, visitors, leadership and governance, ensuring that resources are identified and available, demonstrating involvement of diverse external partners, identifying peer networks, and providing links to your business plan and corporate policies, processes and systems. Because what we don't want is that the equality action plan is a kind of standalone, you know, document and approach, but we want to make sure it's integral to all of your work programs. Next slide, please. So things to consider in terms of diversifying the workforce. So it's really important not to make assumptions about people. You need them to complete the monitoring information so that they can self-identify. This is really important in terms of things like hidden disabilities and non-obvious ethnic backgrounds. So that's really important not to make assumptions. In terms of your job and volunteering descriptions and person specifications, it's really important to only use the necessary criteria and not to include things that aren't particularly necessary and therefore could kind of exclude certain groups. Need to widen the reach of advertising, so going into those places where you haven't advertised before. Providing access to equality and diversity training for the recruitment team. Recognising transferable skills from other sectors and other types of work. And considering the potential of applicants rather than the direct experience. And if appropriate, consider putting on open days targeted at underrepresented groups, which you are allowed to do. Okay, and also I suppose the final thing is, once we do get kind of a diverse workforce, it's important to consider the culture of the organisation. So to make sure that it's welcoming to everybody, particularly through accessibility. Okay, next slide, please. Leadership, it's very similar really to workforce. Obviously, it's really important that key decision makers reflect the diversity of contemporary society. And we know that there is underrepresentation at this level. So if there is leadership underrepresentation of specific groups, again, consider advertising externally and internally for leadership roles when they come up. Think about working with specialist organisations to target diverse leaders, and some organisations do have a lot of experience in doing this. Taking into account transferable leadership experiences and skills from other sectors and types of work. Looking at who's applied for and being promoted within the organisation. And planning ahead by taking positive action, which you can do under the equality legislation, to target underrepresented groups for leadership training. Next slide, please. So in terms of visitors, so knowing who your visitors are and who's missing, identifying who you want to target and reach out to by going to where they live and work and socialise. Reviewing accessibility using specialists where necessary, particularly around disability access. Trying to find out if there's any specific barriers for particular groups. And you can do this through surveys, as I say, by going out into the community. Considering how you would adapt and develop your programme to increase engagement of those who are currently underrepresented, and making sure that you kind of liaise and consult with underrepresented groups in doing that. Be inclusive in your publicity materials and marketing so that they show that you want to be a diverse organisation. Next slide, please. Again, it's really important that the governance of your organisation reflects the diversity of our society. And again, we know that there's underrepresentation at this level. So when looking at kind of diversifying your board, if you can consider a review of your board recruitment practices and processes and plan ahead in doing that, making sure that the criteria is appropriate for today's world and not just what you've always asked for without any rationale. Not just relying on your existing networks and trying to widen reach again. Providing recruitments, as previously with EDI training and particularly unconscious bias training. Trying to have a diverse interview panel, and I know that sometimes this can be difficult, but it does really make a difference. Ensuring current board members are clear about the organisation's commitment to equality, diversity and inclusion. And that, again, is really important, that everybody is on board with what the organisation is trying to do in this respect. And reviewing the current board's workings and practices to look at ways to be more inclusive. So, I don't know how long meetings are, when the meetings take place, length of papers and that kind of thing, all of which could be off-putting to certain groups. And making sure that when you do get some new members on board, that they are valued and supported. Next slide, please. And in programming, which I refer to Creative Case for Diversity before, so that's looking at how we work and what we produce and making sure that this reflects the diversity of contemporary society. and responds to issues around race, ethnicity, faith, disability, age, gender, sexuality, class, and economic disadvantage. And an inclusive approach to this is a great opportunity to be innovative, and this can result in building long-term organisational resilience. So on programming and collections, things to consider. Sorry, that's next slide. How will the programme or collection reflect the diversity of contemporary England? What plans have been developed for collections and programmes to provide opportunities for diverse practitioners and develop partnerships with diverse organisations? How will members from protected characteristic groups be recruited and selected and involved when developing and delivering the cultural or artistic programme? And that includes interpretation of collections, and how you're going to evidence that the actions, that these actions have been taken. Next slide, please. So just in terms of measuring equality actions, so making sure that at board meetings, this isn't just an agenda item, but there's regularly full discussions around the actions that have taken place or proposed activity, how things are going, and making sure that there are agreed actions for the future with report backs. A timeline that shows what will be happening and when against key milestones, having annual equality, diversity and inclusion reviews and moments, and regularly monitoring and evaluating the actions that have taken place as needed. Next slide, please. And this is just really a sample equality action plans, and I'm sure you've all got much more sophisticated equality action plans than this, and it would be helpful if some of the organisations have developed action plan templates, that those good practice examples are shared. But this is just, I suppose, just to help those who to make a start. And as I said, just touching on COVID-19 and Black Lives Matter. I mean, obviously, with COVID-19, I don't need to tell you that this has been really challenging for organisations like yourselves. And we all know that the Arts Council included, that there is still a long way to go on diversity inclusion, and COVID-19 has been a huge threat to the work that we have been doing to increase representation, and we don't want COVID-19 to set us back with the EDI agenda, because it's more important than ever that any gains made are not eroded. And when forced to make difficult decisions, obviously around restructuring and looking at your organisation, that these need to be made in line with kind of equality laws, making sure that there is fairness and equality in the workplace. And then around Black Lives Matter, obviously that's been, throughout the summer and up until now, there has been a lot of voices, I guess, in terms of Black Lives Matter and the importance of kind of having an anti-racist approach. And as our CEO, Darren Henley, said, it's clear that despite our best intentions, we have so far failed to create the systematic structural changes needed for our sector to be truly diverse, inclusive and welcoming to people from all backgrounds. And where we have the agency, we are working to deliver change, but our actions need to be meaningful, measurable and purposeful. And I think that's really, really important because, as I say, everybody's talking about race at the moment, but what we need to make sure is that that talk leads to sustainable action and not just kind of, little kind of things that can make a difference for a short period of time, but that we kind of take a really, step back and take a wider and bigger approach. So that's COVID-19 and Black Lives Matter. Next slide, please. As part of kind of the COVID-19 and Black Lives Matter agendas, we as an organisation have published some temporary equality objectives, and they cover improving access to the sector for disabled people in terms of workers, audiences and participants, ensuring that the funded organisations and projects that we're involved with can demonstrate meaningful engagement with Black, Asian and minority ethnic workers, audiences and participants, that we challenge racism and embed anti-racism values across all of our policies and funding decisions, that we address specific disadvantages faced by children and young people and older people as a result of COVID-19, and that's there based on the evidence that we have seen, and improving access to creative and cultural activities to those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, which again, we've seen the evidence that these are some of the communities that have been particularly affected by the pandemic. So we want to make sure that these objectives inform all of our decision making in response to COVID-19 and Black Lives Matters. Okay, and next slide, please. I've just added this slide just so that you can see that from a DCMS point of view, that they do take the kind of diversity agenda seriously, and they've published some diversity actions, which shows the commitment to museums, and this is around curation, interpretation, representation, and recognising the need to increase diverse representation in museum visitors, boards and workforces. So I just thought it was important to show that. The next slide, please. And this last slide is really just some of the resources that we have available that hopefully can help you in kind of your action planning. So we've got the Arts Council Recruitment and Workforce Development Toolkit, which is an online resource, and that's available if you go onto the Arts Council website, and you can sign up to that, and then if you have access to all of those resources, and it's open to any organisation. We also have the Arts Council Guide to Producing Equality Action Plan objectives, and we have the Culture Change Guide. There is one resource that I forgot to add, and that one was published following COVID-19, and that's called Caring for Your Workforce and Making Fair Decisions in a Time of Rapid Change. So if you put all of those titles in with Arts Council England, you should be able to access those resources. And that's the end of the slide presentation.
Based on the Arts Council one, action planning pointers here, which we'll email out to you. This is something to have a look at, but you'll be populating over the coming weeks. Again, picking up what Collette said, it's important to make it sort of realistic, and the fact that we are here to help. So you're not doing this in silo. It's very much thinking about what's realistic for your organisation and what you can achieve. But it's actually the action of writing it down, which is just as important, and then sharing that with the rest of your organisations as your sort of first steps. We'll be doing all the other stuff anyway, but this is sort of my challenge to you, is to write down some of the action points that you start thinking about and talking to your other members of staff, board of trustees, etc., about what those could be and how they're embedded, whether that be a separate plan within your forward plan, business plan, or audience development plan, as is relevant. You will also be sent, I just quickly pull it up. Can everybody see that document? So what I've created here, so you'll have one of these for each of your sessions. You'll see there's a contents page, and we've talked about some of the things we've already talked about, but there's more detail and there's more links, as it were. So if I go down quickly to some further lots more statistics there, but so for example, some of the further reading, you'll be able to click on that and it will take you through to the links. These were all checked as of last week, so I'm hoping that within a week that they haven't changed any of the URLs, but if anybody links onto anything that doesn't link to anywhere, please do flag it to me, because it means that they've been mean and changed it in a week. So, and I will change that back, if that makes sense. That's a new tip for me, is that when I change the screen, it doesn't automatically change on yours, so apologies. Learn something new every day. So as I said, that is what the document looks like. It's got some links, page numbers, etc. And for each of the sections, I've ended them with, if I go down to further reading, with all of the links there. And you'll see, if I go back to the top, how that's broken down. So we've got stuff around what we mean by diversity, so some more links into some definitions, and more around the business case for diversity, picture of diversity in London, approach to Arts Council's approach to diversity. The reason that we're talking a lot around Arts Council is because they obviously fund London Museum development to support you guys in this work. So we enable you to meet those Arts Council objectives, as it were, through the work that we're doing on this course, but also some of the other things. So haven't just plucked that we will be supporting you through this course to be able to achieve some of those. And then we've got a section on developing equality action points, which is some of the resources that Collette mentioned. So that's been collated for you with all the links. So does that make sense to everybody? Can everybody see that? Okay, so it's not meant to be, as I said, this was very much an introduction session. So that's just a quick roundup. So key text to read is on there. The next session will take place next Tuesday, the 8th of December, 10 till 12:30, and we'll be talking around planning for inclusion. We'll be looking at lots of data, and you'll be talking about your data, what's available data. You can probably tell that I get quite excited about looking at data. I realise I'm a weird child when it comes to this, so you'll just have to bear with me. I have already prepared all of that data based on your local boroughs, but I am pretty sure I have your correct boroughs. But before you go, if you could just write in the chat function what your local authority or your local borough is, that would be really great. I'm pretty sure I've got it all right, but there will always be one that I get wrong. So please do pop that in the chat function, and we'll send those out to you to have a look at. And there'll also be time at the next session to have a look at that as well. And I think that is it from me for today. So